We'll be starting our webinar in a few minutes. Please stand by. You can register for all of our instructional webinars at buffaloniagara.score.org. Our website also lists our national live and recorded training webinars. Let me now introduce our presenter, Ang Jandak. Ang is a marketing professional with over 17 years in the marketing industry with a focus on digital. Ang believes people are the foundation of any business. She's adamant about creating and streamlining processes so people can focus on people, not paperwork. At this point, I'd like to bring Ang in. Ang, the microphone and the controls are yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ted. Introductions will never not be awkward. Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be here with you today. My goal is for you to get a better understanding of branding and what it means for your company and how you use it to connect to your end user. I get really organic with this, so I try to give you as much information as possible so you have the PDF to refer to. I have lots of links and things included there, but for me, branding means one thing. There's a lot of things that a lot of famous people have said about branding, so we'll start there and then we'll just see where it goes. If you do have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. I have tried to time this so that we have plenty of time for questions, because that's what I really want to do, is be able to connect with you guys and answer your specific questions. So let's go. What is a brand? Seth Godin said a brand is the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that taken together account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another, which I think is like a really beautiful, elegant way of looking at a brand. But then we also have what Jeff Bezos says, which is your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. To get to my version of what a brand is, it's the scalable personification of your business. Straightforward. And what do I mean by scalable personification? A lot of people are the face of their business. So they say, I am the brand. No, you're not. You might be the spokesperson, you might be the face, but you're not, you can't truly be a brand because you aren't scalable. And I'm going to do a really brief story of somebody that I love very dearly that I worked with, who had a business that essentially they were the brand. People were coming to the business only because of them. And they were doing really, really phenomenally well for a one-person shop, but they wanted to expand. Their goal is to expand. And I said, look, the problem that you're going to deal with is because your brand is built solely on you, anybody that you bring in will be seen as lesser than. So by trying to expand, you will actively hurt your brand and your business because you've built the entire thing around you. There's nothing saying that you can't be the face. There's nothing saying that you can't be involved, doing commercials, having a blog, having it be in your voice, but that doesn't really count for an actual brand. A brand needs to be scalable so that it can grow past just one person. So brands typically break down into two sections. Keep in mind that every single one of these slides, I could talk for like 6 hours on. And Ted and Mike and some of the people in here have heard me talk for an extended period of time on all of these things. So always, if you want to, please feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I would love to talk about these things with you more in depth if you're interested. But for the most part, brands break down into two sections: visual, which is what most people think of when they think of a brand, and then what I very professionally refer to it as the vibe, which we will get to in a minute. So the visual has logo, the color palette, your typography, imagery, any sort of design elements or patterns, basically, what we see with our eyes when we think of a brand. And the first thing that a lot of people think of is a logo. And logos, again, I'm going to try to keep it very, very focused for you. A logo can be a bunch of different things, but in general, it should be easily readable. It should be very distinct. There are a lot of companies that use apples, but there's only one computer company that uses apples. You'll see a lot of, especially in small businesses, somebody will have a really successful logo and then everybody will try to do their own version of it. And that doesn't help your brand at all. Trying to ride the coattails of what somebody else is doing isn't true to who you are, and it will not resonate with your customers. And again, the entire point of this workshop is to get you to understand how your brand will resonate with customers and how to break down what your difference is to get that resonation. That's a word, right? Yeah. Resonance. Resonance is a much better word than resonation, which I totally made up. So one of the things when we're looking at a logo, we want to know where it's being used. A logo can have many different versions. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about logo lockups or icons or word marks. And often what that means is it's just a different version of the logo that's used in a very particular instance. Hello, my darling. Mommy's busy. Thank you. So one of the things that you want to understand is when you're looking at your logo, where is it going to be used? If it's going to be used digitally, you have a lot more freedom in terms of your colors. If you're going to have it embroidered or screen printed or something, or excuse me, everybody, this is my daughter and she wants to be a part of this today. If you're going to have it be something that's on a window decal, it needs to be one picture, one image, one color. You need to be able to utilize it so that it's visible, it's easily distinct. When somebody's driving by, they'll be able to know that it's for your brand. Also think about if you're doing social, you want to make sure that you can see it. I'll see lots of times people will take a giant logo and they'll just shrink it down for their social use, and you can't read it. You have absolutely no idea what it's about, and it doesn't work. People can't follow, in a giant wall of text, they're not going to see what your brand is because it doesn't stand out because it's too tiny. A favicon, when you go on a website, for those who don't know, that tiny little icon that's at the top of the tab, that's your favicon. And if people are having multiple tabs open, it's a nice distinct way for them to be able to get back to where you are instead of starting all over again. Knowing, is it flexible? Is this something that I can have on an ad and also use in apparel? Is this something that works across all different use cases of my logo? Also looking at a color palette. Color palettes are really powerful. Here we have 3 different color palettes with the exact same logo, and one feels a lot more high energy, one feels a bit more soothing, and one feels a little bit more professional. Or maybe, when you're looking at it, you feel different things. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind when you are developing color palette for your brand. Think about who your audience is. Something that comes up quite frequently is we love white here in America. It is a color of, purity, of innocence. And in other cultures, white means death. In a lot of Eurocentric cultures, purple is the color of opulence and luxury. And in some places, purple is toxic. It means poison. So understanding, you are not very helpful today, understanding what your customer base is and how they're going to utilize, and read color. Also keep in mind that and this is something that I have linked in the resources, is different colors, different color theories. There's certain colors that people just automatically have a sense of. If you look at fast food restaurants, they're all yellow and red, and because they're trying to get you in and out as soon as humanly possible. Then you have things that are subdued. A lot of spas will go with very, very desaturated soft color palettes because they want you to relax. They don't want to create that sense of urgency. So understanding color theory, understanding how colors pair together, that is all essential to understand your brand, and we'll get into that exercise later. Typography. The fonts that you use also send a message. There's an entire psychology behind typography, not just how you utilize it in your logo, but how you utilize it in your brand as a whole, ensuring that it's legible on the print format as well as digital. There's a lot of fonts that look really, really good on a brochure, but they don't translate well to online. In addition, you want to make sure it's something that's accessible. There are actually a lot of fonts out there now that are made specifically for people with dyslexia, to make it easier for them to read things online. But keep in mind, you want to ensure that whatever you're doing with your brand, is it stylistic? Is it something that is only going to be utilized as a design element, or is it going to impart information? And if it's going to impart information, you probably want to stay away from overly decorative fonts or scripts or things like that. Another thing that comes up when you're talking about the visual part of your brand is imagery. And that can mean a whole bunch of things. Imagery is kind of like, the junk drawer of the visual brand. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the slide that we have up here, there are two photos. One at the top is Nike, which you can tell by the swoosh, and the one underneath that is from a Lululemon campaign. Both of them are high-priced athletic gear. Both of them use photography and imagery in very, very different ways. In Nike, it's all about upping the contrast. They want it to be hard. They want it to look dirty. They want the harsh light to show the imperfections of the skin. And they want to make it feel gritty. As opposed to Lululemon, it's a lot softer. It's about this being your time, your space, and being able to be comfortable and be beautiful while you do it. It's a luxury brand, and they really want to emphasize that with the soft lights and the bouquet. Excuse me just for a second. Babe, can you take her? Thank you. And then we also have illustration, which can fall under imagery. With illustrations, you have MailChimp and you have Etsy. Both of them are being used on their websites and being used in very different ways. MailChimp, it really speaks to kind of their icon. It speaks to, it wants to be cool. It wants to be seen as, let's be honest, MailChimp is usually where people go first if they have an email campaign, if they want to start email automation. So they really want to be a little bit more artsy and have fun with that. And if you look at their social, you can see down here that they are having fun with it, and it's the same style that carries over within their social media. And with Etsy, they also use illustrations on the bottom of all their pages. If you have a shop on Etsy and you are going into the back end to look at, their wiki pages or their FAQs or to contact someone, all of those have illustrations, and you can definitely tell that it's branded with Etsy. So those are very, very strong elements of their brand that don't necessarily fall under the other visual medias. And then another thing, and I kind of put this on here really quick, just as a last minute, sometimes brands can have iconic or patterns that are part of their brand but aren't part of the logo. The Louis Vuitton pattern is really iconic and a part of that, where even if you covered up the logo, you still recognize it. In fact, a lot of people do replace the logo, as part of parody or knockoffs, and you can still recognize that iconic brand. So really quickly, that's the visual part. I want to thank you very much for sticking with me when things got chaotic over here. I'd like to take a minute or two to see if there are any questions really quick. I know that that's probably old hat for a lot of you, but I really wanted this to be able to be something that somebody new could come in and be able to get information from it, as well as somebody who is a little bit more familiar with branding. Are there any questions really quickly?
I don't see any questions in the chat,
Okay.
Ange.
All right, great. Well, let's get into Vibe, and then we'll start talking about how we can use all of these together to help build our own brands. So with the Vibe, you get the name, the slogan. We talk about personas and buyer personas, your vision and mission statement, your company values, your brand voice, what platforms you utilize, and what partners you decide to partner up with. So with a name, there's a very big difference between a good name and a bad name. And I did not follow through on that, but you know what? We're going to just go by the seat of our pants and talk about what makes for a good name. So a good name needs to be distinct. It needs to be something that stands out, and it needs to be something that makes some semblance of sense. Even if it's a nonsense word, it needs to either be punchy. Lots of tech companies, they use nonsense words because they know that it's going to stand out. It's going to be something that's going to catch in somebody's head. There's a lot of companies that say, Bob's Best Plumbing. And while there's nothing technically wrong with that as a name, as a brand, it's really hard to build off of that because it doesn't stand out. It's not something that really resonates with people. If it's something like Bob's Last Minute Plumbing, that's got a little bit more of a connection, that's got a little bit more of a story, people are already going to tell themselves, oh, who is that guy, that emergency plumber, what was his name? Oh yeah, last minute, it was something last minute. And then they're going to Google last minute plumbing, they're going to find this person. And that's kind of what we talk about when we talk about a brand. A brand is so many things. It's not just what companies think it is, it's somebody's experience with your delivery driver on the road. It's their experience when they contact customer service. It's the packaging that they get when you send them something in a mail. Every single element of that speaks to your brand. And so keeping that in mind when you come up with your name, there are companies who come up with offensive names and it works for them because they know their clientele, they know what their market is, and that's fine. And there are companies that come up with, really, really subtle names, or very, they don't mind blending into the background because it works for them, because they're very location specific. And they know that if somebody looks up their name and they happen to be in their area, they're going to find it. So again, it's all about understanding your clientele. One of the things that I really like to do when I think about names is I love to go to history. I love to go to translations. Once we go into our brand and we figure out our core elements, I love to use those as resources. Iconography is another big thing, especially when it comes to logos and being able to pair those. History has so much to tell us. There's a bunch of archaic words, I think, that are really, really, they make for really good names because they stand out. So I've got links to all of those in the resources at the end, and we'll be able to go through those then. But in general, you want to make sure that your name connects to your customers, and you want to ensure that it stands out. And that's about it. So for a slogan, there are a couple of rules that I have for slogans. One is it has to be clear. If you have to explain it to somebody, it's kind of like a joke. If you have to explain it, it doesn't really work well, and you really need to go back and address it. It needs to be emotive. It needs to make people feel things. What they feel could be interpreted by them. It could be something that's set out by you, but it needs to make them feel something. It needs to be catchy. If it's overcomplicated, it's not going to stand out, and it's not really quite a slogan anymore. It needs to be something that's pliable and flexible. if you can adapt it in different ways, use it with different campaigns with a couple of different shifts, that makes for a really, really great slogan. It needs to be user focused, regardless of if you're business to consumer or business to business. A slogan is something that you need your consumers to identify that this is the place where they're supposed to be. And your slogan is a huge part of that. Names can be, names are very flexible. They can be imaginary. They can, not necessarily be connected, but your slogan really should be connected to your customer. It needs to be a rallying cry. It needs to be something that people take to heart, and that they really grab strongly onto. All brands should have people who are amplifiers, who are huge fans of the work, and that they, if they'll say it, there are people who get just do it tattooed on their arms. I mean, obviously not everybody's going to be a Nike, but that stands to just how strongly people feel about the brand. And there are lots of other brands where people, they really identify with it. And so being able to include that in your slogan, make it something that somebody feels attached to, that they use it in their everyday life. They use it as a mantra. Obviously, not every single brand is going to be able to do this, but it's a great thing to aim for. In addition, a slogan is forever. Sometimes you'll see companies that like every year they come up with a new slogan. It's one thing to have a brand rewrite, but to have a new slogan, it really shows that you're uncertain about your brand and you're trying to just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. So knowing that when you go into a slogan, it's going to be forever. It's something that's going to be attached to your brand. You could always make a sub brand. You could make an ad campaign that has its own slogan, but the core should last forever. Also, there's something that you'll see on a lot of brand books and brand guidelines. They'll talk about this is our company vision or this is our company mission statement. And it can get kind of confusing knowing what the difference is between the two. And the vision is your destination and the mission statement is the journey to get there. So as an example, I have Patagonia on here, and Patagonia recently changed their vision, but it works really well with what their previous vision was. So that's why I'm using it as an example. So their vision is they want to save the home planet. Patagonia has always been really, really big on conservation and environmental causes. And so they changed their vision to, save our home planet. That's their goal. That's their destination. That's where they want to get to. How are they going to do that? Build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. Now, part of that, you'll see their values tie into that. Their values, they want to build the best product. They want to cause no unnecessary harm, use business to protect nature, and they're not bound by convention. And that's one of the few values that wasn't in the mission statement, but it's something that they feel very strongly about. Patagonia has done a lot of really interesting ad campaigns that really set them apart to show they're not about the money. They're not about, even though they're incredibly profitable, it's not all about being profitable for them. It comes back to their vision, doing things differently. I was reading a really interesting book that was talking about how Patagonia, after the Twin Towers, they looked at their line for the next season. It was all in blacks and grays, and they realized that they would have to shift, and they were able to do that by virtue of showcasing how well those work against nature and being able to focus on going back out into nature again. So it really worked for them because they were being different and because they weren't bound by convention. In regards to your vision, it's 4 parts when you're putting together a vision. You want to look at your outcome. You want to look at your unique selling point, what makes you different from all your competitors, what makes you different from things that aren't necessarily your competitors, which we're going to get into in a second. Look at your intangibles, the things that, people can't touch, that are the benefits, or, they're the things that they're pain points, understanding those and working them into your vision, and then make it human. Stay away from a lot of jargon speak, stay away from, you know, trying to sound lofty, give it a human element, because that's what people, again, are going to connect with. So with your mission statement, what do you aim to do? How are you going to do it? Who are you doing it for? And that brings us to our buyer personas. Now, this is a really important part of understanding your end user. And in my work with businesses of all different sizes, what usually ends up happening, especially in small businesses, you have somebody who their business is their baby. And they look at how their business is a reflection of who they are. And so they look at themselves as the end user. And you have to realize that you're not. I worked with a company who did elder care real estate. And the people who were in charge of their marketing at the time, they really wanted to market it. They saw all of the buyers as them. People who had really fantastic relationships with their families, who, when they had to downsize their parents' home or sell it after their parent had passed, it's a really heartbreaking moment. And they just wish that they could have that family back, that moment back, because they were so emotionally connected to it. And the thing is that wasn't the usual buyer persona for this particular client. The majority of people who came to them for this service, this very expensive service, were people from out of state, people who didn't have a good relationship with their family. And so the last thing that they wanted to do was to come up to the house where they had bad memories and handle it. They were much happier to throw money at the problem to make it go away. And the problem is they were missing that because they didn't actually look at their users and their buyers and create individual personas for them. And the other nice thing that's about a buyer persona is you don't just focus on how it reflects on you. You build an entire life for this person, and it helps you to understand their values and how you can speak to those values. So the buyer personas are really, really important. Look at what is their lifestyle, what is important to them, where are they in the buyer journey. For a lot of different products and services, it's not just about clicking a buy now button. They could be a big part of, researching. And is this someone who says, you know what, I'm tired of doing this, I'm just going to click the first thing that sounds good to me? Is this someone who creates a list of pros and cons and then contacts you to get more information, then goes back to do more research? Is this someone who is all the way at the end because they've already done their research? This is understanding your buyer journey, and what that looks like for someone is really important when you're building a buyer persona. What does their day look like? How do they start their day? How do they end their day? Where does your product or service fit into that? And how will it make their life better? What makes them happy? What makes them sad? What makes them angry? You could have two people who have very opposing views of what makes them happy and what makes them angry. And you cannot make both of those people happy. So understand that. Know what their goals are, and understand what you know and what you're assuming. No brand is good for everyone. And I don't care what the biggest company in the world is, not everyone is a customer. And understanding that and being okay with that when you go into looking at your buyer personas. I've talked about this in one of my other workshops. So, I'll ask people, who's your target market? And they'll say everyone. And it doesn't happen. So the more that you can have a buyer persona and have several buyer personas, they don't all have to be the same. Different people can get different things. If you look at HelloFresh as a use case, HelloFresh is for busy professionals. HelloFresh is a gift that parents will get for their kids who just got on their own for the first time and don't really necessarily know how to cook. Completely different buyer personas, but they both get the same utilization out of the service. So this is an example buyer persona. It's a woman. Her name is Sharona. She's 36. She's currently single and comfortable with that. She enjoys traveling with her dog, who she refers to as her child, to the point that she chose a role strictly so she can work from home and be with her puppy. Has no problem spending money on experiences or quality, but hates the concept of stuff and clutter. Has loads of acquaintances, but very few friends. Is very tactile, prefers to learn by doing. At the end of the day, she wants to have made an impact in some way, to know that her existence mattered, because sometimes she worries that it doesn't. And that's why she wants to experience everything that she can. So by doing this very, very brief buyer persona of this person, we get an idea of how our company can speak to her and understanding how we can talk to her through marketing, as well as what she's looking for in a brand. If we know that she doesn't like clutter, the likelihood of having really chaotic colors and jagged shapes, things that really clash and cause anxiety is probably not going to be something that's going to appeal to her. So doing this for a couple of different buyer personas can be really effective in helping us narrow down and get more of an idea of what direction we want to take our brand in. Voice. So voice is the personality of your brand and how you communicate with others. So we have some logos here. All of these brands communicate very, very differently with their clientele. They see here, hello, hi, sup, all right, yep, howdy, hi, greetings, yo. There are some brands that are incredibly informal, and there are some brands that are incredibly formal. And understanding where your goal is with your brand. Do you want to be seen as an expert? Do you want to really, you want to be somebody that everybody shares when you post something? Like I can think of Wendy's and Arby's, their social media would get posted all the time because they would get into like flame wars with other fast food brands. So understanding how you're going to utilize that in your social media. Understanding, hey, you know what, maybe for our core brand, we're going to have a really formal voice, but let's have a really fun voice. I know the national parks, several of the national parks have, okay, we're going to tell you there's a landslide, so this part of the park is closed, but then they have another national park Twitter account that is really fun, and maybe they're pretending that a groundhog runs it. There's always options, but understanding your goals and how you're going to utilize your voice and creating those options is really important. Customer service is a big thing, and it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. To some people, customer service, I'm not a big fan of the customer is always right, because the customer is fallible, and always agreeing with the customer can hurt your brand. That doesn't mean that you should always be mean to your customer, although there are businesses that have done quite well under that model. I called out these two brands, which I'll get to in a second. But when you're talking about customer service, how easy or difficult is it to get help? There's an entire website, Get a Human, that is dedicated to getting people access to live customer service reps to solve a problem. Those companies typically are not looked at fondly on for their customer service. Then there are places that have chat bots that are all automated, and for a lot of things it's really helpful, but if you have a really specialized problem, you need to go to the next level. And does that chat bot allow you to do that? What platforms do you use? If you have really tech savvy consumers that work with your brand, then that's fine. If you expect them to go on Twitter, Instagram to get help, or email. But if you don't have very tech savvy consumers, they need to have a phone number to be able to contact you. And do they follow up with you after you've had a problem? I don't necessarily mean, how did we do? Give us 5 stars, but actually caring about how, if your problem was solved or not. And the reason that I included these two, I've had a personal experience with Bombas. And if you told me ever that I was going to spend that kind of money on socks, I would call you a liar. But we got gifted a pair. They were really comfortable. They were really durable. So I decided to get some for my husband, and we got him calf socks because he has a blue collar physical labor job and he wears work boots. And the issue was these calf socks did not go over his calves. Again, he works a lot, so he has really muscular calves. And I thought to myself, great, how am I going to send these back? I called, they said, okay, we'll send you on another pair. And I said, well, what do I do with these? And they said, oh, just give them to somebody, or, donate them. Just, I'm sure that they'll be able to help someone. And they just sent us another pair, and I got them the next day. And they also have a guarantee for kids socks. If your kids outgrow or destroy their Bombas, they will replace them. That is fantastic customer service. And it's not just a guarantee, but it's how they execute the guarantee. It's so comforting to know that you're going to make kind of a big investment in socks, but to know that they stand behind it. And if anything happens, they'll back you up. And then I included Chewy because Chewy is famous for excellent customer service. Chewy, if you have a subscription service for pet food and you've lost a pet, and you have to cancel that service, they will send you flowers and tell you that they're sorry about your loss. They have artists who will spontaneously draw a picture of your pet and send it to you. They really want people to feel like they're understood and that they understand how special their pets are and what a big part of their lives are, and to thank you for trusting them with taking care of your pet. Excuse me, I got really emotional. So that's two great examples of customer service. Platforms, social media platforms, not everybody is a great fit for every social media platform. There's all kinds of businesses I see with a Pinterest account that don't need one, or their user base is not the type of user base who utilizes Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. Not everybody needs a TikTok. Understanding what social media platforms you're going to be utilizing is really, really essential to knowing your brand and how you're going to work with it. Video, audio. Are you going to be a really heavily video focused? I know everybody's talking about how essential video is, but there's a difference between long form video and short form video. There's a difference between instructional video and, slice of life video. How are you going to utilize that, and how are you going to set yourself apart? With audio, are you going to do podcasts? Are you going to do playlists? There's a whole bunch of different options to look at when it comes to audio. Merchandising, the community, website. Are you going to have an app? I would say that 99% of businesses have absolutely no reason for an app. There's nothing that a well-developed website can't do. But if you are going to have an app, make sure that it serves a purpose, that it's not just a glorified website, because otherwise people will not engage with it. And it will cost you money every time, it's just, most people just need a really good mobile website, which I will not go into a rabbit trail down. But for the most part, a website will do much, much better things for you than an app will. And then if you're going to do a brick and mortar, what is that experience like? I know that is a really big ask for a lot of small businesses, the brick and mortar experience, but your brand has to be considered there. If you want to be known as the scruffy deli, like, lean into it. People love that. But you have to, go full bore into it. You can't just do little bits and pieces. And that's the thing, again, with the brand, and understanding your consumers and what they want and what's important to them. Who you partner with is really important. I think that that's really been one of the big differences about the internet over the past decade or so, is we've been able to see how people respond to businesses that partner with those that they don't want to be associated with. And those businesses distance themselves. And that also works with collaborations in the future. If somebody is going to partner with a company that is known for being bad for the environment, for stealing water from people, and the company that's partnering with them is an environmental brand, even their biggest fans are going to say, hey, why are you doing this? This person stands against everything you stand for. Do you really not stand for those things? How can I trust you now? Understanding who you're partnering with, not just in collaborations, but who you give money to as charities. I think that a great example of that that's always coming around in the news is Chick-fil-A. There are a lot of people who will never eat there because of what they do with their charitable contributions. And that impacts their bottom line. Now, Chick-fil-A isn't hurting itself. You know, they're doing great, even though they're only open 6 days a week. But there are definitely people who will not work there. And that's fine because Chick-fil-A understands their consumer and they've made it a part of their brand. Now we're going to talk about brand development. You're going to go take a bath. Have fun. So with brand development, there's a lot of different elements that go into it. One of it is your surface level attributes, the things that when you just look at your business, you know, and it's the really easy stuff that, you know, the stuff that if somebody says, hey, what do you do for a living? It's what you tell them on the elevator. Then there's the benefits. What do you do for people? You know, how do you help them? It could be a positive thing. I give you this. It could be a negative thing. I take away that. And a lot of people really buy things based off of negative things. They would much rather avoid a pain point as opposed to get a benefit. What are your company values, the personality, the essence, what your company is or isn't. Sometimes it's really hard when we basically have infinite options to break it down into something that we can use to build a brand off of. So using, okay, I know it is this, I know it isn't this, is really, really helpful. I saw that one of you works in web development. I'm sure that you've gotten this quite a bit where somebody's like, I know it when I'll see it. You know, I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want. And you know what? That's really helpful for helping you understand your brand. Just, you know, at starting out and then building off of it. This is an experience. This is a journey. It's something that we get to after doing a lot of exercises that seem silly and not connected. And then we put them all together and it really helps us to get a better understanding of what our brand is. So another part of it is, how do you make others feel? You know, do they feel relief? Are they happy? How do they feel when they see your box come in the mail? You know, what are you doing for them and how does that translate into an emotion? The core questions, I always love to use who, what, where, why, when, how, because I think that, you know, for most things, it comes back to these core questions. Who is this aimed at? Who's the audience? Who's the buyer persona? But you have to have like an actual person in mind. What is the goal? What are we attempting to accomplish here? Are we trying to be seen as a friendly advisor? Are we trying to be seen as a cool place to come after work? Are we trying to be seen as a cozy place that you can buy a gift certificate for your mom? What is the goal? Where are we sending them? This works in marketing campaigns as well, but for the most part, like when somebody is looking or engaging with our brand, where are we sending them? Are we sending them to the website? Are we sending them to the brick and mortar? Like, where do we want our brand home to be? When are we doing this? Is this something that, you know, we're building over time? Is this something that's really immediate? Why are we doing this? And how are we measuring success? So I use these questions when it comes to basically everything. You'll see them make another appearance later on. But who, what, where, when, why, and how are always questions that we should be asking ourselves during the branding process. Intangibles. Every purchase is driven by an intangible. Not everyone can define it. Honey, I need you to go see daddy. Thank you. An intangible is something that you can't touch. And it's basically what people buy. One of the big ones that people are always talking about is time. People buy time. When people buy food, what are they actually buying? You could say, oh, they're buying sustenance. Okay, well, there's a big difference between somebody buying filet mignon and somebody buying ramen. That person buying ramen is trying to buy, a full belly for as low cost as possible. The person buying filet mignon might want to impress somebody. They might want to, try a new cooking technique. This might be something that they've been working towards and they're trying to learn more. Understanding what that food means to them. Am I buying McDonald's because I love McDonald's? Am I buying McDonald's because it's on my way home? Understanding what those intangibles mean. I was talking with somebody recently who got a Roomba, and they initially bought the Roomba because they don't like buying a bunch of gadgets, and they bought it because their partner had double knee surgery, and they knew that they weren't going to be able to vacuum the way that they usually did because they would be taking care of them. And they said, Ange, I never realized it, but what I bought wasn't a vacuum cleaner. I bought a life free from interruptions. I don't have to lose my momentum because I have to get up and vacuum the house because I have so many cats. I can sit there and continue my train of thought. I can continue my work. I don't lose momentum because of this little robot vacuum. Like, I get my momentum back, and I wouldn't have even known that that's what I was missing. And those are the intangibles that sometimes we have to define for people. And so when you think about your buyer personas, when you think about your goods and your services, you want to consider what are the intangibles, and always drill down more. Okay, I'm saving them time. Well, what does time mean to them? Does time mean time with their family? Does time mean time to do the things that they want? Does time mean freedom? Does time mean flexibility? Like, it's as soon as you think that you have an answer, see if you can define it more. I used to work with a woman who did psychology, helping prep astronauts who are going to go into space. And there was a lot of things we talked about. And the one thing that I came away with was, every time you think you have an answer, see if you can drill down more. And you'll know that you have the true answer when you can't anymore. How do we measure success? So this is something that, it's really hard in brands because, the brand is the brand. It's not like something that you can change every once in a while. We already said that you can't do that. But a brand, you have to have like a good baseline. You have to know how you're going to measure success moving forward, and to know if the brand is working. And so we're going to break that down here. 1, KPIs, key performance indicators. Essentially, this is going to be different for everyone. In the resources, I have a link that has a list to different kinds of key performance indicators. But essentially, what is the metric that you're going to track to know if something is working or not? And then there's the baseline, which is, if you are constantly changing things, it's really hard to know what's working and what's not working. If you are testing, something during your busy season, and then you're wondering why it's not working during your slow season, that's not really fair. You could be doing really, really well for your slow season. You wouldn't even know. And then conversions versus engagements. We're going to be talking about the difference and why they're both really helpful, but they're very, very different, and you have to track them differently. So KPI, for example, if you know that your goal is to be making more money, KPIs that you could be looking at are the number of transactions that you're doing, or the average order value. If you're doing more if you know that you want to be making more money, you could say, okay, something that I want to track, it's how many orders we're taking, but I also want to track the average value of that order. Should we be adding should we be doing upsells? Should we be increasing our pricing? Because if we increase our pricing, we won't get as many orders, but the average order will go up. And how does that look in terms of our overall brand? Are you attracting the right people? lots of times, again, we get stuck in this methodology of I'll take anybody who's breathing and wants to give me money. And that hurts our brands in the long run. So we need to be looking at if the people that we have coming in are actually being beneficial and they're helping our brand. And so some of the KPIs we can use to track that are a customer lifetime value. Oftentimes you'll get people who come in and say, I've been a customer forever. I've been a fantastic, wonderful customer. And, you need to make this right for me. But if you look at them as a lifetime value, say, hey, you know what? You spend almost no money. You're constantly in here asking for free things. You're not a customer that, I'm going to bend over backwards and help, because you're hurting my brand. The people are here who are doing the right things, who are, for example, if you're running a car dealership and you've got somebody who is constantly complaining, they don't want to pay for anything, they want everything for free, and then you have people who are doing their services, they're getting their oil changes done, and when you look at them in terms of lifetime value, one person you've made $1,000 from, the other person you've made $20,000 from. Which one is a better customer? And if you didn't track those and instead you just track them by how frequently they came in, you might think that the bad customer is better. But that's why we have these KPIs to be able to track it. Also understanding customer acquisition costs. This comes a lot into online advertising too, but essentially, how much does it cost to get a customer in the door? It is much more expensive to get a new customer than to keep an old customer. And so we want to be able to understand how much it's costing us to get those new customers, and to see if once a customer comes in, are they doing marketing work for us? That's where customer loyalty programs come in, and being able to see what they're bringing and if they're helping to lower our acquisition cost, or things like social shares or referral programs. Awareness, one things that come up a lot, everybody knows about traffic, like, oh, my traffic was up. The thing that's really important is to understand that when your traffic comes in, what are people doing at the end of it? Because it can be really easy to put an ad out and say, if you click this link, you'll get $1 million. You're going to get a whole bunch of traffic to that link, but nobody's going to do the thing that you want them to do. They're not going to get any business from it. So make sure that, when we have traffic, we're actually tracking what's beneficial to us, as opposed to, just that we have numbers coming in. And then the traffic source, where is the traffic coming from? If you see a certain blog post or a website that mentioned you, or a news article, and all of a sudden you've got all of this traffic that's coming from there, and these people are buying your goods and services. Oh, this might be somebody that we want to reach out to. This might be, somebody that'd be really beneficial partnership for us. Hey, this means that our Instagram post really, that weird behind the scenes video that we did that was 30 seconds long, that did so much better than all that really highly polished work that we bought from a company. So maybe we want to be looking at doing more of that stuff. That's another KPI that you could be utilizing. So these are just a really brief overview. Like I said, in the lower right hand corner, you can see a list of different KPIs. There are thousands of KPIs. They're all very independent based on your use case of what will be beneficial to you. I would definitely suggest picking no more than 10, especially when you're starting out, because otherwise it can really be confusing, and you want to start from a place of understanding. And again, the goal, what is the goal? What is the purpose of doing this? Knowing what your KPIs are and keeping them really limited, and you can always expand them later. When we talk about a baseline, we want to have that, starting point, essentially. That's another term that you could use for it. So knowing what our best practices are, and utilizing those. If you know that your website is really bad, that it doesn't work on a phone, don't use that as your starting point so you can pat yourself on the back and say, oh, look how much better I'm performing. Because in reality, you're just not actively harming yourself anymore. It's not a fair test. It's not a good baseline to go from. So make sure when you're doing a baseline, you're going from best practices. You've already done, the SEO work. You have a good website that loads quickly. And then making sure that you're looking at year over year. I'll come back to the Y view in a second, but one of the things, like I mentioned before, if you have a busy season, you have a slow season, you can't compare your busy to your slow and month to month and be like, oh, why is everything dropped so badly? you know, if you're selling Christmas trees in January, you're not going to be sitting there expecting the same business that you had in November. It just doesn't work that way. And so you want to make sure that when you are measuring your success, that you're looking at year over year in comparisons. You also want to make sure that you have a really wide view when you're looking at these measurements. Sometimes people get really focused on certain things and they miss really, really important information that's happening in another area. So, you know, if you're really caught up in traffic, you might be missing, hey, I just realized that all of this traffic is coming from a competitor, and they come to our page, they see that we're not what they want, and then they go somewhere else. You know, making sure that you're looking at it in a very, very wide view and you're not too hyper focused. And then also note your internal and external impacts. If you have updated your website, that's going to change how all of your different metrics work. If you were on the local news program, that is not your new standard that you have to meet unless you're expecting to go on the news program all the time. And keep in mind that if you do that, you will be getting fewer and fewer returns on that, because now people know who you are. They aren't going to be as active, you know, it's kind of, they're going to get tired of you. So make sure that you're noting that internally, so you can say, oh, where did this traffic come from? Oh, that's why. Oh, why is this bad? Oh, that's why. Hey, I have a restaurant, we had a blizzard and we had to shut down. And so a lot of people, you know, they bounced. You know, if you're tracking your bounce rate, a lot of people bounced. Oh, well, that's because the website said that we were closed. That makes sense. Making sure just notating that when you're tracking these is really, really important. Conversions versus engagement. A lot of times people use them to mean the same thing. A conversion is somebody interacting on your terms, the business's terms, and an engagement is somebody acting on their terms. So an example of a conversion is clicking a link in a newsletter, buying a product, RSVPing for an event, joining a loyalty program. It is like the goal that you have for them to do on they're performing the exact action that you need them to. Engagement is a little different. Engagement is them doing it on their terms. So sharing a social post, using a chat bot. You don't know where that's going to go. They could want to yell at you, and obviously that's not something that you intended or want, but it still is engagement, and it counts as an engagement. Somebody tagging you in a social media post. These are things that they control. It's on their terms. Even though they're still engaging with you, again, engage, it's not, it doesn't count as a conversion because it's on their terms and not yours. So all of that, it has been a very, very chaotic time. Thank you very much for sticking with me. At the end, I have some example brand guidelines, and you can see how these different companies have looked at their brand and what they've put together for their colors, their slogans, their voice, research on names, logos, color theory, if you want to play around with putting together a palette. Humint and Chroma are actually AI tools where you can go through and work with them, and they'll help you put together something which is really fun. I've got information on typography, helping to put together a brand. If you want to put together a branding workbook, or there's a brand guide generator that's really helpful. And then this link down here, 75 more articles, because I wanted to make sure that we left time for talking. But if you wanted to have any more information, you could delve into those articles. That being said, let me go through the chat really quickly. My slogan
Yeah, there were
was
two.
oh,
Yeah, you got two items in there. Go ahead. Go ahead.
My slogan was "You're safe with us" as a locksmith company, but they kept saying yours wrong, but I say no. It's meant to mean you're safe with us. Your safe is with us until you buy it. Now I just use "you're safe with us" so I don't waste time explaining. That's a great example of the slogan being clear and not having to explain it. You know, it's really hard when you're like, oh, this is so clever. I love wordplay. This is great. But people don't necessarily understand that. I also think that's really interesting because it completely changes the meaning of the slogan. You know, people are kind of telling you like, no, you're a locksmith. I want to feel safe with you. So that was your clientele kind of responding back to you being like, oh, when I look at you, I don't think of you as a place to buy a safe from. I look at you as someone who keeps me safe. So I think that's a really interesting turn on that, and being able to listen to what your consumers are saying to you. The Yellow Pages lady came to where I work for page advertising, but most customers we ask, they find us on Yelp or Google. Never once have I heard them say Yellow Pages. I mean, it's true. The thing that's really interesting, and I'm happy to stop if anybody has any other questions, but I'm going to nerd out for just a second. The search algorithms like Google and everything, they have, I don't know if you've noticed, but it used to be if you search for something, you've got a lot of different options back. And now you're just getting things that businesses have optimized for a certain particular keyword. And it's actually, in a roundabout way, making it harder for people to find the content and the information that they want. So it's something that I've talked about in one of my other workshops. I'll have to look at to see which one exactly it is. But Google My Business is essential for any local business to get found. Make sure that yours is up to date, and make sure that you're using the photos, updating photos of the inside of your business, updating photos of the outside of your business, photos of your products. You can tag each of those photos in Google as to what they are. If you have a restaurant, you can tag it as this is a piece of food. So people can look at it that way. Also ensure that you're using the post feature. Not a lot of people use it, but Google has a post feature in Google My Business where you can use it kind of like a social media. It's great for announcements, and it will show right on your listing when people find your business. So it's a great thing to talk about other terms that people might be searching in the area. If there is a festival happening, you could say, hey, make sure that you stop by such and such a place to get your t-shirts for the festival, that sort of thing. But definitely not enough people are optimizing Google My Business. They're doing the bare minimum, and you need to make sure that you're using it to the fullest extent that you can.
We have one question or one hand raised.
Yes.
And I have gone ahead and allowed the people to open up their microphones. The hand raise is from Obed. And Obed, if you would care to go ahead and use your microphone, open up your microphone, and you can ask your question directly to our presenter.
Thank you. I wanted to find out what is the best branding for water.
Well, again, it all matters. It all speaks to what your user base is. So there are a lot of different water companies that are out there, and they all have very different user bases. There's companies that are really, really expensive. Fiji water is seen as something that, it's more expensive than your average water, and it's unique, it's different, it's square, it's something that gets a lot of placement in shows, reality shows, especially with people who are well off. So Fiji branding is very different from smart water branding, even though they're both considered expensive. There is less expensive water, like Kirkland's water or Poland Springs water, wherever you're located. You can have a water brand that it's all about your consumer. A lot of the store water brands, they focus on, being inexpensive. So part of their branding is in their packaging. They have the really, the squishable explodey water bottles, for lack of another term. And that's part of their branding. So I think that when you're thinking about a water brand, you want to again consider who your consumers are. What's important to them? Do they want to give back? Do they want water that has added electrolytes and things that help them? Do they want water that's local, that was taken directly from the source? What is important to them? And that's what will help dictate your brand.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yep. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If there's anybody else that would care to open up their mic, you can speak directly to our presenter at this point.
I do
Um,
want to think, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, it's my, I don't know if this is a quick question, so it's okay if we can't get to it, but I think I find myself having the issue of maybe getting a little overly excited and going in different directions. So I think the real question is, how do I keep myself focused and continually drilling down, like you said, so that I can continue to stay on brand and just not try to be everything for everyone, but really focus on like a niche,
Yeah. So this link, the branding workbook, is something that I put together specifically for this workshop. And it is going to seem silly to some people, but when you're talking about understanding the brand and drilling down, like what you were talking about, we really, the way that the brain works is really fascinating. And part of the issue that we have with building brands is we tend to go in the same paths over and over again. So like you were saying, you get all of the stuff, you get really overwhelmed, and it's likely because you keep going in the same, like what they call neural pathways. Yes, honey, that's a fish. And I'm going to move this over here so we can see the big exciting fish that my daughter is talking about. But what this workbook is it is a bunch of exercises to kind of create the personality of your brand, to think about it in a really abstract way and kind of separate your brand from your business and then bring it together to make a more cohesive brand. So it's a bunch of exercises where you lay out the facts of your business, you go through some core questions, some benefits, we have the is and the isn't list, and then we talk about inspiration. And this is the part where we turn your business into an abstract thing. So as an example, if your brand was a room, what would it look like? And I know that seems really silly, but the thing is if we were building a room for Lululemon versus Nike, like we were talking about before, the Nike room is probably have a lot of metal, a lot of glass, a lot of dark contrasting colors. It's going to be really aggressive. It's going to be really high impact. The Lululemon room, I think it would be a bit softer. There would be plants there. There would be a lot of light. It would be a cozy place to come and, do yoga. It would smell really fresh. Thinking about all of that, what kind of colors does that bring to mind? What kind of language does that bring to mind? It is, again, I acknowledge it feels like a really silly exercise, but there's a reason that when people are working and doing brainstorming and we're getting really frustrated, they have you do jumping jacks. They have you wiggle your hands and spin around. It's because we're trying to get our brain out of those unproductive cycles. And so when we're talking about branding, and especially with a small business, you've got your heart and your soul poured into it. There's so much about it that's just automatic with you. Sometimes you have to distance yourself in order to really understand it and be able to put all of those pieces together. So when you're talking about drilling down, we're going to drill down by walking in the other direction for a bit. And then that will allow us to approach it from a new viewpoint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, this actually makes a lot of sense. And I think I've been looking at like different designers' websites and seeing even things like mood boards and things like that. So I think it's essentially what you have here. It's just, in a visual kind of format. So no, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, good. And the nice thing about this document is if you want to, you can print it out. You can make a copy and then you can copy and paste images in there, create your own mood boards. There are links in the document for like Figma, if you want to create a mood board in there. There are templates for building a brand. There's all kinds of fun tools in there because everybody works differently. Everybody processes information differently. I wanted to make this as broad as possible so that you could work it the way that you're comfortable with and the way that you want to move through the process.
So Ange, the slide deck that everybody's getting a copy, a PDF copy of the slide deck. So is the branding workbook a clickable?
Yes.
It's an item that they can also click on and download, correct?
Yes. Ta-da, I just did it.
Okay.
Yep, it's right here. I think it's on the very last page. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Tony has his hand up, and Tony, if you have a question, you want to go ahead and open up your mic.
Thank you. Ange, this is I appreciate the all of this. I'm looking forward to working through the workbook. I'm developing a after school program for middle school and high school students based on something I teach here. And so this whole thinking about the color scheme was I was surprised. That sort of threw me because I hadn't thought about that in terms of this. You know, it's sort of a program dealing with anxiety, mistakes, and so on. So I'm thinking the color scheme might be perhaps something more soothing than abrasive. I appreciate that sort of attention to detail that I don't think I would have come to on my own. So it was more of a comment, I guess, in terms of branding toward you know, I'm beginning with this, you know, I'm the goals of the students and the goals of the administration and teachers administrating may differ as I sorry.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
Sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
There's a car horn going, so my dog is responding. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Well, that was it. That was I guess that sorry.
No,
That
and I
different-
think that was what I was actually going to ask you is with this program, when you're looking at who your client base is it the administration? Is it the parents? Is it the kids? You know, because there's when you're branding it, you know, is this something that kids are going to ask for and be like, I need to be a part of this. I want to be a part of this. Is this something that parents are going to be like, I've been looking for this from my child? You know, and I think that also speaks to like when we were talking about things like color palette, you can have exciting colors, but still not, you know, generate anxiety. They can be saturated, but be in jewel tones. So like they're really cohesive together as opposed to clashing, because the clashing is the element that can like really cause anxiety. You know, there's a whole bunch of studies in terms of like how color affects mood, you know, and also just things like, sorry, this is getting away from like the branding aspect of it a little bit, but, you know, audio tools. So something that that person that I mentioned who worked with NASA that we really worked with was creating audio cues attached to coping mechanisms. And so like what might be really cool is, you know, if you have the sound that you play every time that you start the program, and like that's something that like the kids could use in their day-to-day life to be like, okay, this is where, you know, I'm utilizing, but this is completely off topic. Sorry. I get really excited talking about this. Sounds really,
No,
really
I
exciting.
love that idea. I honestly like that idea a lot. I deal with sound. I'm an ethnomusicologist, so
Oh,
that
okay.
that clearly speaks to me. But yeah, all right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Tony. Anybody else? Well, it looks like no one else has a question at this time. Just want to remind everybody that you will be receiving a copy of a PDF copy of the slides, and the resources are clickable, so you can click on them and find out more that Ange is providing for us. Also, you will be receiving a link to the recording of tonight's presentation. And just a parting question. If you had to pick, let's say, 3 points that you would want to leave our attendees with, which of the points, of the many points that you brought up in this presentation, would you underline for our attendees?
One, understand your customer. Your business is nothing without your customer. And so all of this hinges on understanding them and their needs, because your brand is built around them. You know, don't be afraid to try something. I didn't really mention this and I wanted to, but I saw the time, so I kind of let it go. But don't be afraid to try something silly, to fail in the small scale, you know, and then walk away if it's not working for you. You know, again, I really, really want to thank Kenneth for pointing out, hey, I realized the slogan wasn't work. I adapted it. And, you know, because I listened to my consumer and I knew when it was time to adjust. And then the other thing is, you know, really make it about your business. Don't try to copy what you see as being successful elsewhere, because it will not resonate with your people. You know, everybody has their own needs, and your business speaks to somebody, and you just have to understand how to communicate with that person and understand what they're looking for. And thank you all very much for being so patient with me and my family tonight.
Thank you for introducing us to your family, Ange, and thank you for a really great presentation. A lot of information and a lot of resource material too. So thank you so much. Want to thank everybody for being with us this evening. And remember, buffaloniagara.score.org has got lots of resources, as does score.org. We're one of the many organizations in the area that are helping small businesses. So please look around in the area for other organizations which we're a part of, and wish everybody a safe and pleasant good evening.